Awesome. Sergei Revzin, I'm Venture Associate here at the Entrepreneurial Institute. Very good to see you all. You are here, of course, for the info session on our Accelerator series. If you're here for another reason, then feel free to stick around. You might learn something interesting. But raise your hand if this is your first time in the space, if you haven't been here before. Okay, great. We're seeing a lot of new faces here. That's great. And I see some of you here, of course, I've known for a while, and even some folks that have participated in one of these programs. So, yes, the Entrepreneurial Institute at NYU, if you're here for the first time, we're all about helping founders at NYU get their businesses off the ground and helping you accelerate, the word accelerator, accelerate your path toward getting to a venture that is self-sustaining. I am on the venture team here. I've been at NYU since last May, so a little bit less than a year. Prior to this, I was an early employee at a bunch of startups running sales teams, and then I started a couple of startups of my own, and then I ran entrepreneurship programs at a national nonprofit called Venture for America, where I ran their accelerator program in Philadelphia and Detroit and helped them raise a seed fund as well before coming here. And my primary role at the Entrepreneurial Institute is to look for founders to invest in out of our fund. But just because of the nature of the work that we do, really half my time, if not more, is spent on mentoring, coaching, meeting with early stage teams like yourselves, and helping out with programs that we have here, such as the Accelerator and the Accelerator series that we have. So the programs that we're talking about here today. And by the way, we have about an hour together, but I plan to get through these slides in about half hour or so and open it up to questions. If it takes a little bit longer, that's okay. But we're talking about our Accelerator series, and what I mean by that is we have two main programs. We run a bunch of programs here for founders. Some of those programs are really shorter term, some of them are a little bit longer term and more intense, and we'll get into what those are later. But the main programs we're talking about are these two, whose goal it is to support founders or anybody here that wants to start a company. The first program, just as a quick general overview before we dive into the details of what they are, is a 2-week sprint. That's exactly what it sounds like. It's somewhat of a mini accelerator, and in that the program is obviously short form, but also there's a little bit of grant funding that goes along with that program. And then our second one, which is more of a longer form accelerator, is a traditional program like you might have heard. Raise your hand if you've never heard of the word accelerator. I suppose if you're here, you've heard of it at least once, okay. But the person in the back, maybe not familiar. Traditionally, accelerator programs, they were invented years ago. I think 2005 might have been like the first one. You might have heard of Y Combinator. They started around 2005. Techstars, another big one, started in 2006, 2007. And the idea is they give you a little bit of money, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. That's a lot of money for most of us, but for a company, that's a pretty small amount of money, and it's designed to basically get you through 3 months of paying your rent and paying for food so that you can figure out, do I have a business here or not? Can I get some customers or not? And for the companies that invest in you, these traditional programs, they take a little bit of equity, and they're basically placing a bet on you as a smart founder and saying, I'll give this person 3 months, I'll coach them because I'm a experienced entrepreneur, and then hopefully at the end of the 3 months I can see if this is a sustainable venture and I can give them a little bit more money. So those are kind of the traditional accelerator models out there. Most of them take equity, most of them invest anywhere from $15,000, $20,000, anywhere up to like $100,000. Some of the more competitive programs are now. Back in the day in 2005, you could apply with just an idea, be a smart engineer maybe, or a smart salesperson, and maybe you would get in. Nowadays, the most competitive accelerator programs, they require you to have a lot more traction, because getting traction in business, getting a technology product off the ground, etc., has just become so much easier with the proliferation of mobile technology, internet, etc., that the expectation is if you're smart enough, you can get to at least from zero to something, right? And so that's where programs like what we offer come in, is we're kind of that gap that now exists for founders that are really trying to get their ideas off the ground, where maybe a traditional accelerator program won't accept them just yet. We exist to kind of fill that gap and hopefully help you get your business to a point where you can be attractive to more traditional types of investors. But much like other programs, we do look for something to be there. And so these two programs that we're talking about here, our Sprint program and our Summer Launchpad program, vary in a couple of ways. Obviously, the programs themselves, right? One of them's 2 weeks. Again, they're both intensive, they're both full-time, But one of them is just 2 weeks, the other one is 9 weeks. One of them, we actually run our sprint program across 2 cohorts. So we have one that happens in January, and there's some folks here like Jess who's been in our January program. Nader was in our program last year for the sprint, he's sitting here as well. And so that just happens twice a year, and those are typically companies that we've kind of gotten to know over time. Maybe they've come in to a boot camp that we run, maybe they've come in for coaching sessions and we said, look, what you're working on is interesting, why don't you spend 2 weeks validating your business concept through a program. And the sprint is really focused on problem solution fit. You've identified that there's a problem that you want to solve, and now you're trying to figure out, is this idea that I have for a potential solution the right one for that problem? And we help you figure out how to actually get there, how to figure out whether there is a problem and solution fit. The Summer Accelerator, which is a little bit longer, it's 9 weeks, that is an even more intensive program where obviously we have a lot more time to spend with you. We have a mentor network of 150 people that as part of our network, that some of them who we bring in to participate and help you out. I'll get into that a little bit later, but that's really focused around product market fit. So you might use the sprint to validate that there is a problem that exists and your solution might be the right one. The Accelerator, the 9-week Summer Launchpad program, is really designed to help you figure out, okay, I have a problem that I know exists, I have a solution that's probably the right one, how do I create a business around it? Because we want to make sure that by the end of that 9-week experience, you can actually work in your business full time. And those of you here that are maybe second-time entrepreneurs or first-time entrepreneurs that have generated a little bit of revenue, you know that there's a big difference between having a company that generates some revenue and a company that's actually self-sustaining that you can work on full time, right? So that's really what we're trying to help you get to in that 9-week period. So you can think of the 2-week sprint as sort of a precursor to the 9-week Accelerator Summer Launchpad program. We don't require you to participate in the sprint in order to participate in the Summer Launchpad program, but it is helpful because it's a very sort of accelerated 2-week way to get that validation that you need. And there is some funding that goes along with it. I'll say the biggest difference between what we provide and what other accelerator programs in New York and San Francisco, et cetera, provide is that we give you all this stuff and grant money, et cetera, for free. So we don't expect anything in return. We don't take any equity. Most programs, they do take equity. Usually you'll give up anywhere between 5 to 7% for that $20,000, $30,000 because they're taking a chance on you and they need to spend, basically they need to get something in return for that to have some upside. Do we have a question here?
I was just wondering what that AWS means.
Yeah, so AWS is Amazon Web Services. So if you have a technology product, Amazon Web Services is a pretty common way to be able to essentially outsource your server space. And so they partner with institutions like us to provide free server space to students. Because they know that once you become an Amazon customer, if your company becomes really successful, you're probably going to stay an Amazon customer for a long time and bring them a bunch of revenue, right? So they're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing this because they expect some of the startups to take advantage of the free resources to grow and be really successful and become paying customers. But it is a really cool part of the program that you get up to $5,000 in credits with a sprint and $10,000 if you participate in the Summer Launchpad program, the 9-week program, which is great for anybody that's building their first product and they don't want to pay for server costs. That's something that we negotiated with them ahead of time. And the way that this I just want to illustrate this, the way that this plays into our ecosystem of programs. We have boot camps. Anybody here have heard of or participated in any of our boot camps? All right, so they're two-day program, 2 Fridays, right, where you really learn the basics of the customer discovery process and you start talking to some customers. We teach you how to talk to customers to validate what it is that you're doing. A lot of times the people that end up participating in our sprint and our Summer Launchpad programs are people that have done a boot camp, right? And I say that to say that it is not a requirement to do a boot camp to apply to these programs. However, if we know who you are and we know sort of your capacity to do the things you're going to say you're going to do, right, and actually execute, you have a higher likelihood of getting into these programs. Does that mean that you can get into a program if we've never heard of you and you just have something that's really cool and we can see that you have an interesting business idea and you've done something to try to get traction toward that idea? Yes, it's very possible. We have had people accepted into our accelerator programs that have not participated in any of this other stuff. But I do recommend that you consider participating because, again, the more we get to know you, the more we know who you are as a person, the higher likelihood that you'll get into one of those 10 slots in our Summer Launchpad program or in our sprint program, okay? So if you haven't participated in a boot camp, or if you haven't met for one-on-one coaching with any of the coaches at the Institute team, I recommend that you go on the website, you sign up, and you do either one of those things just to get in front of us so that we can get to know you before you submit your application on March 29th. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the value of these programs beyond, we talked a little bit about like the financial and the credits and stuff like that, but it's more than just that. In fact, I think a lot of the value of what our founders that participate tell us that what they loved about the program is the ability to work in a cohort alongside a bunch of other startups, founders that are going through the same thing as you. People that are founders here, you know that being a founder can be very lonely, and working alongside other smart NYU students or grad students, et cetera, that are working on businesses is just something that's super valuable. Another thing that I think is really helpful, when I was starting my first company, I was doing it from home, and it can really get to you when you're working on it from home, and again, it's lonely, and like you're trying to be productive, but you're also trying to like make sales or build product, and it sucks. But with part of the program, the Summer Launchpad program at least, you get 24/7 access to the space, to this co-working space here. You can get in with your ID and access it anytime you want and work in your business. Same with the 2-week sprint, you get 24/7 access to the space to work in your business, and that's just something that we know is important for founders. And then for the Summer Launchpad program, once you successfully complete that program, we're actually going to be offering space to some teams as well. Continuing here, and we have relationships with other folks for co-working space, so you get like 3 to 6 months of free space after the program as well. So that can be really helpful, because office space in New York is really expensive. Nobody wants to pay for office space. It feels like a waste of money when you're trying to get a business off the ground. Of course, it's also the community. Again, that's the people that you're going to be in a cohort with. There's like a camaraderie that stays there for a very, very long time. But also we've been doing this for years. We have successful founders that have come out of these accelerators already, and they're always willing to help, and we invite them. They come back, they give talks. They're really open to helping founders that participate in these programs because they know exactly what you're going through. I would say that there's a common misconception, maybe not among the folks in this room, but with the programs that we run, and there's a little bit of confusion around like who we serve. We serve everyone that is on campus. So we've had people participate from Stern. This is an example of a company that went through our sprint program. Even though they were actually already generating pretty significant revenue, we ended up investing in them through our fund down the line when they were raising a round of funding. We've had teams from Tandem. These are a couple of them that you can see. So some of the teams we meet up from there. But also, we have Wagner, the College of Dentistry, Tisch. You might not expect, but we see folks participating on programs from all over NYU. So if you feel like you might be not exactly a fit based on where you see most entrepreneurs come from, we don't care what school you come from. We don't care what your major is. That's not important to us. What's important is that you're committed to your business and you want to see it through to fruition. And you're going to be among good company because we have kids here from, I shouldn't say kids, people here from all over the school. And we like to support everyone. We take pride in working with students and faculty and staff from all across the university. Our main goal with everything that we do here, and in particular our acceleration programs, the Sprint and the Summer Launchpad that I mentioned, is to reduce the mortality rate of startups. Okay? Because we all have heard the statistics that startups fail at a very high rate. But what might be surprising to you if you haven't seen me talk about this before is that 75% of startups fail to return investor capital, which means 75% of startups that raise venture capital dollars still end up failing, right? We hear about 9 out of 10 fail within 10 years, whatever the variation of that statistic that you've heard of in the past. But in fact, even 3/4 of the companies that get venture dollars end up failing, right? And that might be surprising to you, but that's just the reality. Getting venture capital money, getting outside funding does not mean you're going to be successful. And we know that from experience, and so that's why we do what we do. We want to remove the likelihood that you're going to be not successful, or that if you're not successful with this initial idea, hopefully you can come to that realization quickly enough so that you can move on to the next idea or the next idea, so that one can be successful, right? I probably tried starting 3 businesses before I made my first couple $100, and it took me 8 different ideas to make my first couple $1,000s in a business idea. And so I know from firsthand experience that you just have to iterate and iterate and iterate, and that's exactly what we teach here. And so 75% of startups fail. So anybody want to guess why so many startups fail? That's the case? Give me one reason. Founding teams. So and not the right team for that product. Anybody else? Yeah.
They failed to escape competition.
They failed to escape competition, so the competition basically took their customers from them, or they weren't as good. They weren't good enough.
They failed to pivot.
Okay, so they didn't have the right product for the right type of customer.
There's no demand for what they're making.
Yeah, there's no demand for what they're making, and so more startups fail from a lack of customers. This is Steve Blank, by the way. I don't know if you can see him, but he wrote 4 Steps to the Epiphany. I highly recommend you read that book if you're interested in really diving into the customer discovery process. He pretty much invented it. Very successful, multi-time founder, has built billion-dollar businesses. More startups fail from a lack of customers than from a failure of product development. Doesn't matter how good your product is. If you look at this chart of the top 12 reasons startups fail, 42% of them fail because of a lack of market need. I mean, there's some that fail because they run out of money, right? Usually you run out of money if you can't get funding or you can't sell your product fast enough to recoup that, right? Not the right team is actually another top reason. That's the top 3 reasons right there. But by far, 42%, the largest percentage is because there's no market need. So that means that even though you think the idea might be really good, there's not enough other people that think it's good that are willing to give you cash to pay for it or that are willing to fund it somehow, right? And so that's a big deal. That's a big deal. That's a pretty significant percentage. So much so that we do everything we can to help people avoid falling into that 42% bucket, okay? And that's really the core gist of most of our programs is we want to help you figure out a product that people actually want, right? It's much more fun to work on a startup of a product people want than it is on one that don't, and trying to figure out how you can give it to them and force them to want it. It just doesn't really work that way. And the faster you can get to something that people actually want, the faster the more likely you'll be to actually have a successful company. And so for us, what we think it's all about, how to sort of accelerate that pathway. I'm going back to that word accelerator, but we use it for a reason. It's because we really are trying to help people accelerate their learning to the point where they can have a self-sustaining business as quickly as possible. Because like survival in a startup is just a time thing. You're fighting against time of running out of money, essentially, right? And so getting customer feedback before you finish building and launch your product. What we don't want to see, what we really hope people avoid doing is, like, I've seen so many times people build a product for 6 months, a year, 2 years even, and they go out there and nobody wants the product. And it just like hurts me because that's a lot of time, that's a lot of resources that you might have spent, engineering resources, whatever, on something that you hope would work and it doesn't. So we want you to get in front of customers or potential customers who you think are going to be your customers as early as possible so you can learn from them what their problems are, and then you go and solve those problems, right? You can learn from them if they want the thing that you think they want. And so that's the biggest thing, and we want people to learn that as quickly as possible. We think it's about launching products that customers actually want quickly and cheaply. We think it is relatively cheap now to launch most products, and so we want to help you do it as quickly a way as possible. And so we favor customer feedback over just gut intuition, right? You might even think that, okay, well, such companies like Facebook or Apple or whatever, I mean, they launched because of somebody's vision, right? They didn't launch because of customer feedback necessarily, or at least they had to have the product before they could get the feedback. But if you actually go back in history and read how they started off, right, the computer that Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak built was actually just good enough for hobbyists in the beginning, right? It was, nobody else would have used it except a hobbyist. Then they built it to a point where a computer store wanted to buy it, and they sold like 50 to 100 units, I think, to a computer store, a local computer store. That was the only person that would have bought it that day, right? And they used that education to learn more and more about how can we actually take this to the household, the regular household. But it took them iterations of learning from customers, learning what people would react to before they could actually do that. Same with Facebook. They built it first for Harvard. They built it first for one particular use case, to see who's single on campus. And it's literally that was what it was used for. There was no news feed. There was no wall even back in 2005 when it started. I remember when I was in college and like in the late 2000s, we were all waiting to get Facebook, and all you could use it for literally is to see somebody's image and maybe what major they are and if they're in a relationship or not. But that particular use case worked really well at Harvard University, and then they expanded it to Ivy Leagues, they expanded it to schools in Boston, and then finally everybody else got it. But they learned everything, they learned from their customers along the way. They didn't build out a news feed or a wall or all that stuff until later. Right? So we want you to build in small bursts and iterate as you get customer feedback, and then launch. Okay? And so that's really what we prioritize, and that's what we help you do through our sprint and our accelerator. This is just our Net Promoter Score for our Summer Launchpad program for 2018, and so far every sprint that we've had, because we're very, very hands-on. There are 9 people that work for the Entrepreneurial Institute. Pretty much everyone here that interacts with these programs has either started a company or has been an investor and has taught entrepreneurship for a long time. So we've seen all sorts of startups. We have a wide network of individuals that we have seen both succeed and fail, and we're really dedicated to helping founders that go through these programs succeed, which is why we only really accept like 10 in each of those programs. Part of it is just resource constraints. We wish we could back all of you, but we can't. And part of it is we get really hands-on to the founders that we do support, which is why we need those founders to be really serious about their businesses, right? Yeah, so just some dates. The Startup Sprint, that 2-week program that I mentioned, is going to be running from May 28th through June 7th. And that really is targeted for current students or people graduating after the spring, so sometime in the fall or later. We also potentially look at staff or postdocs or researchers. That program, the sprint, really doesn't matter what stage you're part of. Again, we've had a company, the bra company that I mentioned earlier, they're already generating revenue. But the sprint program, you can be a little bit earlier stage. You don't have to be generating revenue to be accepted in that program. You don't have to have a ton of users to be accepted in that program. What you do have to have is, again, demonstrate to us that you're serious about it, that you've already started to validate the business in some way, shape, or form. You've done the research, you understand the market. All of these things, those are signals to us that you're serious about it. If you apply with just an idea and you haven't done anything to research it, you don't know who your competitors are, it doesn't look like it's serious, and you're probably not going to be one of the teams that's accepted. Now, I will say that if you're graduating if you're a senior and you're graduating, you should still apply. We will still consider you, but I'm just saying this is who it's more targeted for. And this is what the sprint has looked like, just some results that you can see. These are some of the teams that have gone through our sprint. Actually, these are all from, I think from last year, and one of those is from the year before. I can tell you just by eyeballing it really quickly, more than half of them are generating significant revenue. Some of them, not everybody is generating revenue, but more than half are, and a bunch of them have gotten either private financing from outside investors or grants, which are non-dilutive, 1.15 million in grants, and they're doing 1.3 million in revenue across all of these companies. So that's pretty substantial. We're not gonna take credit for all of that, but we think that part of the reason why they were able to succeed is because they learned a lot in a very short period of time, and they figured out what mistakes to avoid. Instead of a lot of startups, which we see spend 3, 6, 8 months learning kind of on their own dime, and they have to start over oftentimes. And these are some other sort of stats across how many schools they participated and everything. By the way, if you checked in with Jen when you came in and gave your email and signed in on the Eventbrite, you're going to get an email with this deck with all the details and everything. If you have not checked in with her, make sure that you do before you leave, so that we have your email address. Okay. Do you have a question on that?
Yeah. Are we going to do questions after?
We'll do some questions in the end. Yeah.
Okay.
We can say no. Okay, great. Okay, I'm just going to show you some things from previous cohorts, but again, the focus is really understanding your customers and getting out there and talking to them. In fact, so several times through the program, and right now I'm talking about the Summer Launchpad program, the 9-week program. We have workshops, we have VCs that come in, we have alumni, NYU alumni that come in, so you're going to hear from real founders. This happens a couple times a week. And you get to meet one-on-one with those founders as well, right? We have something that we set up, I think we can actually talk about it in a second here. Yeah. That's the one-on-one coaching that I mentioned from our team and from external mentors as well that we invite, so it's not just us. We know that you want to hear from people that are actually in the trenches right now, so we bring in external mentors to talk to you as well during the Summer Launchpad program. This is Carly Rooney of thenot.com. You might have heard of. They're a publicly traded company that her and her husband started. They're Tisch grads, actually, and they have a crazy story, but those are the kind of people that come in and help our founders because they love NYU, because they themselves are from NYU and they want to see other folks like them succeed. That's just kind of how it works, and they're willing to give up their time to meet with folks like you. This is for the Startup Sprint, the 2-week program. You get $350 up front. $350 is obviously a pretty low amount of money, but it's enough to do some small tests. And the constraints that it gives you, I think, is really important. And then you're eligible to receive up to $1,500, and that just depends We don't give it to everybody right away because sometimes after a week or after 2 weeks, some companies, they decide, you know what, this isn't the right business, or I can't work on this anymore. And so the funding is somewhat conditional, the rest of that funding, but you get $3,500 up front. And then you receive, I think I mentioned AWS, you get legal coaching, free credits. Innovation and Balsamic are prototyping tools, technology tools. Again, these are things that we just don't want you to be spending out of your pocket, but prototyping is something that you would be doing during the 2-week sprint as well. And that program is really focused on, I mentioned a little bit earlier, but for those folks that came in a little late, the Startup Sprint, that 2-week program, is really focused on the customer discovery program and problem solution fit, and figuring out how do I interview customers, how do I ask the right questions so that I make sure that I'm learning the right thing and listening to the right signals, and how do I inform my product decisions based on that, and make sure that I validate and pivot as needed. We like to show this canvas because it's just something that you'll see, like even if you sign up for a one-on-one coaching appointment, you see it. The canvas, has anybody here not seen the business model canvas? Okay. This is not an academic exercise. The reason why we show the canvas is because it is a good way to lay all of your hypotheses on a piece of paper so that you know what they are. You don't want your hypothesis to be in your head because then you don't know what you're testing for. When you're going out there and talking to customers, it's important to understand what are the things that I need to know about this market, about these people's problems that are priority right now. Because with each customer you have 20 minutes, half hour to talk to them about usually, right? So what is the most important thing for me to learn right now, and what's important for me to learn later? And that's really what that canvas helps you do. And one of our teams is actually, Jess is sitting right here. You guys use this canvas for over 2 weeks to basically invalidate the majority, if not all, of your hypotheses, right? And so, I mean, can you tell us like why that was helpful to you? Since you're sitting here, not to put you on the spot, but
Yeah, sure. Well, it was helpful because then it allowed us to not in the sprint, because that took a while, but now moving forward to know what to focus on and what not to focus on. So by invalidating, it was like, okay, we're not going to talk to these people anymore.
Yeah.
We know that they're not our target market.
yeah. And so sometimes it takes, that's what it takes, is it takes writing down those hypotheses and actually going out and talking to people, and then you learn it's not sometimes hard to learn that most of the things that you thought were true are not, but we'd rather you do it 2 weeks than 2 months or 3 months, right? And so that's really the point of that sprint program. Let's see this one. That's really, the expectation for that sprint, by the way, is that you have 50 plus conversations with potential customers to validate it. Sounds like a lot, but we've had people, last sprint, we had several teams that did over 50. We had a few that did over 80 conversations. It's not easy, but you kind of have to hustle to get that done, right? But, it's doable. We've seen many teams do it, and they do it sometimes through going on the street, trying to meet people. They set up sometimes meetings ahead of time. They ask their friends for introduction. Every time you meet somebody, you ask them for introductions. But the point is that that's the amount of conversations it takes for you to start getting an idea of, is the thing that I thought was true? If you talk to 5 people, that's not enough. You don't want to base all your business decisions over the next year based on 5 conversations. It really takes 50 plus, and that's what we push people to do during that sprint program, and most of them are successful. And then you actually also present every other day to us, to your advisors, and get direct feedback based on your presentation. And that's a really good way to learn very quickly. And you become a much better presenter because you get on the spot pretty much every other day, which is great. The Summer Launchpad program is going to be from June 11th to August 8th. So again, that's a 9-week program. It's a full-time program. Both of these programs are full-time, which is why we do them in these dates, so that you don't have classes that you have to worry about. And this program is really focused around, the other one was really problem solution fit. This is really trying to get product market fit over that 9-week program, which is again a fairly short period of time, but we've seen many companies do it. We've seen companies go with a prototype that they've been testing for months, and by the end of the program they're generating 5-10K per month in revenue because they learned exactly the right customer to go after, and they figured out a repeatable process to do it. And so that's really what it is. And to get into the Summer Launchpad program, you really have to be at least the proof of concept stage, meaning you have some sort of prototype that you started showing people. It doesn't actually have to be a product, like a technology product, We had a nonprofit last year go through our program, and since then they've raised I think like $150,000 in grants. The reason why we accepted that nonprofit is because they had already done the work up front to get the different intermediaries that would make that profit successful commit to either donating or to running a program with them, right? So for them, that was their prototype, right? They had like a website, but that doesn't even count for a prototype. They were actually able to get commitments for something that they were trying to do, right? So it doesn't matter whether you're a services business or a product business or a nonprofit, you can have some sort of proof of concept that shows us that what you're thinking about is real. And if you're not quite there yet, then maybe the sprint is more of a fit for you. But if between now and your application March 29th, you can actually show that you can get some sort of proof of concept or early user or beta sign-ups or whatever is relevant for your business. We can be the judge based on what's relevant for your business. Then you might be a fit for that accelerator program. Sometimes we ask teams to participate in both, and we have had teams participate in both. Like if we think you're almost there, but with that 2-week program can really help you hit the ground running and be even more successful during the 9-week program, we might ask you to participate in both. But there's just one application for both of those programs. Here are some of the teams that went through our Summer Launchpad program over the last couple of years. They raised over $2.4 million in grants, $26 million in venture dollars. These are all real numbers. They're doing over $100 million in revenue. This is across all of them, right? So it's not any one single company. But again, so that there is impact from these programs. But it's not just the program itself, it's also the network that you build from the programs too. The outside people that we involve, the outside investors, all of that. And let's see here. These are just some of the partners that we have that participate. So I mentioned to you that we have investors come in, we have entrepreneurs come in during the Summer Launchpad program. Not only do they come in, we actually have a dedicated group of investors from the New York community. These are partners at funds, sometimes they're associated funds, that become basically part of your board. They're not really part of your board, you're not giving them any shares or anything like that in your company, you're not exchanging, you're not signing any legal documents or anything like that. But what happens is you get matched up with an investor that we think is relevant for your business, and every 3 weeks you meet with them and you present to them over 90 minutes and you get direct feedback from them. And these are people that have a ton of experience that invested in a ton of companies that are giving you direct feedback on your business and helping you grow. And we've heard from many founders that that experience itself is pretty transformational, not only because of the experience of these people, but actually that structure that provides, knowing that every 3 weeks you're going to be meeting with these legit people, it can be pretty empowering and it forces you to actually execute. And that's part of the reason why we designed it that way. So that we're not the only ones giving you feedback, we have real people from the community giving you feedback. And we've seen it happen that down the line, 3 months, 6 months down the line, those same investors end up investing in your business as well, because again, they know you, they trust you, they see that you keep on executing. So those are just some of the folks that we involve. You know, some of them are more active than others, and depending on the year. But as I mentioned, the Summer Launchpad program, the 9-week program, is really more focused on the customer validation and execution part of it. We really expect by the time you get into that 9-week program, that by the end of that program, you're either going to be in a position to raise a small round, or you're going to be in a position to be generating revenue. Okay, which is why we need you to be a little bit further along, at least proof of concept stage, before you are eligible for that program. Okay, we really kind of talked about all of this stuff. But yeah, as I mentioned, most of the folks that complete the 9-week program, they do generate revenue by the end of it. But again, it just depends on the company. Other companies are different. We also have weekly AMAs that we do, which is a founder coming in and giving a talk, and basically it's a Q&A where, again, it's a limited, it's 10 companies, so it's going to be like 20 or 30 of you with people from companies like this where you can ask them direct questions. So that's a really good opportunity to build a relationship with folks like that. So you will learn through these programs how to raise capital, again, if it's appropriate for your business. I will say another big difference between our accelerator or our programs and other programs is we don't expect all of you to raise money. In fact, we think many of you shouldn't raise outside capital beyond maybe some friends and family or angel money or grant money. Raising venture capital money puts your business on a different trajectory, and it's just not the right thing for everybody. We're aware of that, and we will help you determine if that's the right thing for you. If it is, we'll teach you everything you need to know to be able to successfully fundraise a small round after you graduate that program. But if it's not the right thing for you, then we're going to be upfront with you if we think it's not the right thing for you or not. But yeah, you'll learn sales, you'll learn pitching, storytelling, there's just a whole lot that you'll learn. And you'll get to run experiments along the way. This is just some photos from folks that have been really active and proactive in the experiments. These guys created a product that is algae-based, it's a spirulina product that they sell. I guess it's a superfood now. People buy dry powder and it tastes really bad, and they figured out a way to make it fresh and sell it to you, to the consumer. But they had to figure out, like, do people actually want fresh spirulina? I didn't even know what spirulina was when I first heard of them, but now they're actually generating sales, and they were able to do that by actually going out there, and this is them actually set up in Washington Square Park, having interviews to see if people actually care, right? And how do people react, and what do people think of the taste, and all this stuff. Nothing substitutes that customer interaction that they were able to get. One-on-one mentorship, of course, with people outside and inside the teams. You also get legal help, so it's up to like $5,000 of free legal help. I don't know if you know this, but in order to just incorporate your company, it costs at least $2,000. That's just paying for lawyers. You're paying a bunch of other things too. You're probably paying once a year for accountants, that's like $700. You're paying filing fees, etc. There's minimum franchise tax fees. It costs a lot of money to start a company. So we have legal experts that work specifically with startups to help you incorporate. If you're already incorporated, they'll look at your legal docs, make sure they're all set. They'll maybe help you put together like a stock option pool if that's the right thing for you. They'll look at other documents that you might have, sales documents, etc. But that's up to $5,000 in free legal help. The only thing you pay for is filing fees, state filing fees, but that's standard. No, lawyers never pay for that kind of stuff. These are just some names of mentors that we have that participate in that investor board I already mentioned to you. There's a demo day at the end. We have one for the startup community here at NYU, so you'll get to present in front of like 300 NYU community people. But we also have separate demo days that happen in September, and that's for a select group of teams that we think actually should fundraise. Again, we're not going to put everybody in a demo day with investors if we don't think you should fundraise. It's a waste of your time and their time. So the teams that we do think should fundraise, we bring into a small select group of investors that we know where you pitch at the end of that program. I think I already mentioned that $10,000 of non-dilutive funding as part of the Summer Launchpad program. Legal accounting, we just talked about that. Okay, application details. So again, this is, just so you kind of know what bucket you fill in. You don't need to commit this, please don't commit this to memory because you don't need to do that. But this is just kind of the stage that you should be in. Again, you don't need to have experience. You don't need to be an experienced entrepreneur. That's the whole point of these programs. But for Summer Launchpad program, you just need to be a little bit further along. We do prioritize and like to see diverse teams just because in our experience, we think diverse teams are going to be just have a higher likelihood of being more successful. What does that mean? I mean, it could be different genders, it could be different backgrounds, it could be different majors, different skill sets, different socioeconomic backgrounds, right? You can define diversity whatever way you want, but from our experience, diversity does make a difference in making sure that you have a higher likelihood of success because you have diverse experiences as part of the team, right? And so that de-risks a little bit from our perspective. So we do prioritize. Does that mean that you have to be a diverse team or you have no chance of getting it? No. No, but we like to see it. We think you have a higher likelihood of succeeding. The startup sprint, I will say we require for there to be 2 people at least that participate or more. Again, just because 50 interviews over a 2-week period, we know it's like impossible for you to do 50 interviews in a 2-week period and everything else that you need to do for that program. So we do require for there to be at least one more person on the team. We also strongly encourage for multiple person teams to apply for Summer Launchpad. We will consider solo founders. We don't want to disqualify anybody because they're solo founders, but again, we think you're going to be more likely to be successful if you have a co-founder or somebody else that joins with you. So I just want to be upfront about that. That'll be part of the consideration, but definitely not all of the consideration. Last year we had a guy that came in as a solo founder. He already was generating, he was a rising sophomore, which we usually don't take rising sophomores into our 9-week program, but he was already doing $100,000 in sales. And he brought in one of his buddies to be basically not really a co-founder, but kind of like a guy who was helping him throughout that he would consider as a co-founder. So we make exceptions if we think it's appropriate, but again, we want to make sure that you're going to be successful during that 9-week program. So we're looking for certain things. I kind of just mentioned some of this, but the startup sprint has a little bit more structure. The Summer Launchpad program, there is some structure around it, but it's really more self-directed. So it's for people that are working on real businesses. And so really we're looking for teams that are a little bit further along. Again, this is a lot of text. I just wanted to have it out there. This is going to be in the deck that you're going to get in your inbox if you registered at that link. Dates apply by March 29th at 5 p.m. Okay, it's one application for both programs. Then you can check a box as to which program you want to apply to. It could be both, it could be one or the other. If you're not sure, say you're not sure and we'll help you figure it out, right? That's totally cool. We have orientation happening April 29th. Some coaching that we offer coaching for anybody that gets into the program with all of our coaches ahead of time. Summer Launchpad program, these are just some dates that you should be aware of. Again, June 11th to 14th, that's when the program is really starting. So these are just kind of some save the dates that you should be aware of if you're going to apply to these programs. I mentioned to folks that were here in the room before, but just so all of you are aware, again, you have a higher likelihood of getting in if we know who you are. If we've never heard from you before, you submit an application, we have zero context for who you are as an individual. We just don't have much information to base off of. So if you've never met us before, that's cool. Submit an application, but try to find time to meet with us one-on-one. Go to our website, entrepreneur.nyu.edu, sign up for a one-on-one coaching, let us know you applied, meet with us, talk with us, and we can just kind of see where you're at, figure out if you're a fit. We have the program finishing in March. There is going to be another boot camp. I mentioned that 2-day program happening in April. Again, a boot camp is a good way for us to evaluate where your startup is and help you sort of figure out how to get to that next step, right? So you can apply and still participate in that boot camp because we're going to have that boot camp before we make decisions on the decisions on who gets into the sprint and the Summer Launchpad program. So keep that in mind. That is an option for you. So application for either program is due on the 29th. Yeah.
So you're not making decisions till April.
Yep.
We're applying in March, and a
Yep.
lot can change in between
Yep.
March and April.
Yep.
So how do we keep you up to date with what's actually moving forward?
Yep. So you can update us over email. You can update us over meetings with us one-on-one, whichever way you want. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I already mentioned this. That's it. So what questions do you guys have? Matthew?
So for the sprint, I know for on-campus housing is over, so how are you supposed to live here 2 weeks and then literally go home to a hotel or
Yeah, I mean we unfortunately can't help with housing, so you kind of figure it out.
there's no 2-week lease.
Your lease is up in May.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we could talk about this offline, but there might be some access to on-campus housing, but I'm not really sure about that.
So you guys don't handle that.
We don't handle that.
Online it says that in order to apply for Summer Launchpad, you have to have already completed the summer sprint. So if you're applying to the Summer Launchpad and get in, does that mean you get to the sprint, or how does that work in terms of that requirement?
Yeah, so we will, based on your application, we'll sort of recommend whether you should participate in the sprint or not. If you've never participated in a sprint here, then we will ask you to participate in one of those. I wasn't aware that it was a requirement, but if that's the case, then yeah, you can participate in both. The programs don't overlap, so that would be fine. Yeah.
Yeah, so if we do apply, when do we get a decision?
You will get the decision by, I believe, the end of April. That's a good question. Did anybody else here know that has seen it maybe on the website? I believe it said by end of April that you get the decision. Yeah.
All three applications are March 29th?
Yeah, it's two, so the sprint and the SLP, and it's one application.
Oh,
Then you
okay.
just check which program you're applying for. Okay.
Have you ever had nonprofit ideas in the sprint or the next sprint?
Yeah, we have. We had I think I mentioned this probably before you got in the room, but we had a nonprofit called Government for America that participated last year. You might have heard from them. Actually, they're participating in the 300K this year, but yeah, that is a program that helps young people get into government jobs. And by the time they applied, they already had some state relationships with state governments that were going to place people in their programs, and they were starting to figure out their application process for the fellowship and everything. So it wasn't just an idea at that point. But yeah, we're open to nonprofits. We just want there to be some validation that the nonprofit will work, basically. Yeah.
Do you ever get anyone in from the NSF to maybe talk about SBIR or TIR during these processes? Because it's kind of right in the middle of one of the deadlines, but
Yeah.
we're kind of timely to get that kind of input.
Yeah.
to apply.
I'm not sure if we have anyone on the calendar right now to talk about that, but we have, my boss Frank actually taught at the NSF for a long time. He has relationships there. he knows what it takes. We have a bunch of founders that have received grants from them. So if that's something you're looking for guidance for, you should definitely sign up for coaching with one of our team members. We can help you out with that. Yeah.
The boot camp that you mentioned, is that an application or did you just sign up for that?
That's an application as well, but it's you don't have to, like, you can be just idea stage.
Okay.
You could get it, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about what you're looking for with this concept for the Launchpad?
Yeah, so it really does depend on the business, I would say, right? So again, it could be a product business, services business, nonprofit, kind of, there's a bunch of different types of businesses, and for each business, proof of concept or validation means something different, I would say. What kind of business are you working on, if you don't mind sharing?
Personal styling. Personal styling.
Okay, personal styling, right? So for personal styling, for example, maybe you have, I mean, this is just like a really basic example, but maybe you have an Instagram page with a couple thousand followers that are already taking advantage of your personal styling services or just engaging with your brand in some way, shape, or form, right? I mean, it depends on what you're thinking as far as personal styling goes, right? Are you connecting people with stylists? If that's the case, then you probably need to have a piece of technology where you connect people through a web platform. Maybe it's a WordPress site that you build, right? It could be in a number of different things, so it just kind of depends on the business. But for you, for personal styling, I would say that's not a very technical product. You could probably figure out how to build a prototype yourself. You could probably figure out how to get some people interested in it. So that's like a matter of you showing us what can you do there. Yeah.
For the Sprint application, like how far along should the business idea, the business be to be something that would be like actually looked at, taken serious for being accepted?
I would say that you should at least have a good idea of a few potential target customers, because the main value of the sprint is that you will spend 2 weeks talking to as many customers as possible. And if you try to join without like thinking, okay, like there's 10 potential customers, right? That's not going to be enough of you to go off of to test any one particular one. So the idea should be far enough along where you have at least an educated guess as to who a good target customer segment would be. Okay. Other questions?
Is the day-to-day structure of the summer Launchpad very similar to the summer sprint, where we're going to have, I guess, the morning time for lessons and presentations, but the rest of the time is outside of the building, market discovery?
So I would say that the major difference between the sprint and the Launchpad is it's less program. There's still a lot of, like, yes, you're still meeting with us a lot, and you're still hearing some sessions, but the session, like, there's fewer sort of talks, and not all talks are mandatory, right? Because we know the main goal is for you to go out and get customers and like figure out basically how to sell. So like the first week or two, there's more programs, like kind of courses and talks, stuff like that. But after the first couple of weeks, it's really, we're still meeting with you on a regular basis, but you're really going out there and trying to build a business. So it's a little bit less structured. Yeah.
So just a question of the application process. Will we be asked to provide a pitch deck, or what can we expect with that, a website, demo?
So again, it depends on the business. I don't believe we ask for a pitch deck. I want to say like 90% sure that we don't, just because the pitch deck is not really relevant unless you're raising money. So there's going to be questions about the product, the solution, competition, your team, what you know about your customers, stuff like that. Pretty things that you should know about your business. Yeah, the market size maybe. Yeah, yeah.
And just another follow-up question about the space. Would we be able to tour the space after this info session?
Sure.
And also another question about, you said something about having a space 3 to 6 months after the program ends. You know where that is, what kind of space that is?
So we have a couple of folks that we have relationships with that offer space. It's not set in stone right now, so I can't really tell you like make any promises. But we also are, we may have a few teams that we let work out of this space. It's just limited here. We also have a space that's being built out in Brooklyn right now that I'm not exactly sure when it's going to be available, so that's why I can't answer. And then we have relationships with some of the other labs and stuff on campus that offer space as well. Yeah. All right, one more question? Cool. Again, if you registered on Eventbrite and you signed in when you came here, you're going to get an email about this. If you have not, Make sure that we have your email address so you can get it. I'm going to stick around for the next 5 minutes, 10 minutes or so to answer any other questions that you guys have, okay? All right, thank you for coming. Oh, much appreciated. Tim, is that you?
Yep.
Yeah? No way. So let's do that guy you mentioned. Really? Great, nice. There you go. All right, sounds good. Is Jen here? But you'll get it. You're
I know Tim.
Tim, we met at the practice.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
How about you? How's everything?
Good. We're running our program right now.
Yeah.
What's the new company about?
Auto tune. So be part of their customer story. Video.
We also have
I feel like a couple companies cropped up recently about that, right? Is it specifically what area of customer interaction is?
User generated for marketing.
Yeah.
So we,
It's like August.
technology wise, AI is
So
So it's like whatever company is selling, you help them make better videos with that product.
well, like, so the brands try to tell their stories, brands, people tune it. Like the research shows basically 11 times, 111 of the people watch a different brand compared to the same brand being the product, but as told by an actual person, a customer. So
yeah, have you done a
platform that tells stories through customers.
Oh.
What we do to make those videos more fun is we can throw very easily. You know how like Snapchat and Facebook have the ability to have augmented reality content.
Yeah.
It's super easy to drag and drop that in the video. If you're a brand new take advantage of that, so imagine if you would just have your own website, the ability to
it's great. So yeah, follow Andy. Again, he'll point you to the right one, but I think probably
But the ads will end up, but the videos will end up on the platform anyway.
on your company's website and share them on social.
I see. I mean, it doesn't necessarily replace ads because ads is just like premium space.
Right. It's
Paid with the same content. I mean, paid for.